Good morning, everyone. Thank you for taking the time today to participate in this important webinar. We will be muting everybody's mic during this presentation, but encourage you to ask questions through the chat feature as we go on. Today's webinar will provide an overview of the Kauffman Real World Learning Initiative. So as we begin to rethink education, we'll need to develop systems in place to help us prepare the workforce of the future, particularly during these extraordinary times. This webinar will help provide an overview of the initiative and how business partnerships play an integral role to the success of the program. The webinar will be led by Hennes, Program Leader of the Business Education and Real World Learning at the Kauffman Foundation. And we'll also be hearing from a great panel today, which includes Richard Groves, the Executive Director of the North Kansas City Business Council, Jake Wingo of the Ray-Pec School District, the District Community Partnership Coordinator, Jack Fry, the president of Fry & Associates, and Keith Chapman, owner of Peculiar Controls. And so with that, I'd like to offer the floor up to Anna to go over the Real World Learning Initiative.
Thanks, Andrew. I want to first start with a thank you for joining us and really kind of ground us in what our goals are for today. I think in this uncertain time, it feels strange, but we are cautiously excited for what comes next, both for businesses and education. I was with a group the other day who referenced this as a time of heightened creativity, and I think that that is true, regardless of everything else that is going on. We have a good hour planned, as there are several attendees on the call. Just again, make sure you're muted. We will be using that chat function to capture questions, and we have time for Q&A. And I would like to start, as we don't really have time for everybody to go around and introduce themselves like we would if we were gathered together in person. Maybe just take a minute and type into the chat window what organization you're with, what you're hoping to get out of our time together today. And then I'll kind of ground us in what our goals are. So as you're typing that in, first and foremost, we want for participants today to understand both the scale and scope of our real world learning initiative. This is a regional collaborative that crosses 6 counties, over 100,000 students, 30 school districts, and that includes all students, not just boutique or elite programs. Second, we would love for those who participate today to make a commitment to support this work through your business, maybe to leverage your network to bring others in, and to do that by directly engaging with students and educators for meaningful interactions that help to inform, guide, and develop our future workforce. And lastly, we hope that you would come away with enough information to be an advocate for opportunities within your network, within your community. Helping to close workforce gaps can support business projects and add to the vibrancy of communities. So if you can be a champion for students, the fuel for our future, the numbers show that our current approach and systems are leaving many out. So finding those who are left behind or stuck in between and changing that changes the strength of our regional economy. So with that, I'll hop right into really what is real world learning, and has maybe I guess I can't take a show of hands, but is anyone in the group familiar with real world learning? Have you heard this term before? I'm seeing some heads shaking now. Okay, so really at its core, real world learning is the experiences and interactions that help students connect with their learning inside school to work, learning, and life outside of it. It's not just one career exploration experience. It's a progression of opportunities that help students define their path through exploring, engaging, and immersing in work as a part of their learning process. So content in the classroom becomes more relevant through the lens of context afforded via real-world applications. So we have an employer who's joining us today with an awesome background of some of his work. And I think, something that maybe we all learned or were required to learn in our schooling was how to calculate slope Calculating slope maybe is not super exciting, but when you put it in the context of designing playground equipment, I think that could start to get really exciting. So thank you, Jack, for providing that fantastic example with your backdrop today. So how did we get here? This work started in March of 2017 with a landscape and market analysis. So maybe if you saw that prior continuum, you had maybe some thoughts or reference of programs you've heard of that you thought, oh, well, maybe I've heard of CAPS, or I know my school district has learning pathways aligned to careers, so that must be real world learning. And the answer is probably yes. But what we found is that across our region in 2017, that landscape analysis, nearly every district in the region has that infused programming, but it's generally only offered to a select group of students. The efforts are certainly inspiring. There are amazing things happening, but they are fragmented and isolated. A critical component to this is the engagement of the business community. And many of you who have been engaged before know that those opportunities are very meaningful, but greater coordination as a region can help make that easier to do at scale. And last, I think the Missouri and Kansas State Departments of Education, while they have a lot of requirements in place for what schools need to do today, there is much flexibility afforded at the local level to go and make some changes that opens up access and scalability of these opportunities. So one of the things we believe is that these lessons learned in that landscape and market analysis also help us understand some of the persistent complaints of employers in terms of the readiness and availability of talent. Another set of numbers that or findings that I think is important for context is that if you're looking into the future, you can see that there are multiple pathways that are needed to ensure that our workforce is prepared for the jobs that are available in our market. So you can see that most jobs require post-secondary credentials, except the reality is that there is no one road to getting those post-secondary credentials. There are multiple ways to leverage learning after high school to gain a rewarding career. Sometimes that's working and learning concurrently. You can see that only 35% of those jobs require a 4-year degree. So what can be done with maybe associate's degree work, stackable credentials, or a combination of the two. We also can see that in both Kansas and Missouri, our persistence rate to and through college is pretty low. And so when you look at the requirements of jobs and then the progression of individuals through those 4-year degree programs, you start to see why, if you are an employer hiring with a degree requirement, you may not feel like you have access to all of the talent that you need. Market value assets is a term that we will introduce you to today, but really we believe that these should be options for all students, and there are a variety of ways to go about earning and learning them. What they will do is afford the opportunity to build critical competencies that are needed to succeed in work and life. So after the landscape analysis in 2017, in 2018, about 40 employers, students, education, and community leaders came together to discuss what a high school graduate should look like in our region. So these consistent themes emerged, creating the portrait of a graduate for our region. Assuring these competencies are developed is not built into our traditional model of education. Some students pick them up along the way, but certainly not all. I don't know about you, but I haven't seen a standardized test that can help hone in on these 5 competencies, but I think we all know, in looking at our own careers and those maybe that we are trying to hire and develop around us, that these are the skills that will consistently ensure success, especially in somebody coming into an entry-level kind of career opportunity. So how do you know if a graduate represents this, if there isn't a standardized test for it? What we have landed on are these market value assets that are regionally recognized. Again, this has been a collaborative effort to pull together what these experiences are that do support building those competencies that I laid out in the slide prior to this. So through work experiences such as internships or client-connected projects, through college credit, that's a critical mass of college credit, and it's aligned college credit to a pathway that that student wants to pursue. Maybe it's through regionally vetted industry recognized credentials, something that employers are hiring for. It's a requirement of the job. And maybe there's an entrepreneurial experience that helps build those skills. So we believe, our goal is that by 2030, every student in our region should certainly leave high school with a diploma, whatever that looks like in 2030, and at least one regionally recognized market value asset, something that's valuable and plugs them into further education, work, or both immediately after high school, or maybe even sometimes during high school. These 4 categories of market value assets could very much change, and they probably, they should and they will, as we continue working together across education and employer sectors. We know that there are new requirements within industry all of the time, and so our goal is to stay current and aligned in those efforts. So you might ask, skip too fast. So how is this work happening and who is involved? So this map highlights the 30 plus districts that we are grateful to work with, representing about 100,000 students. They're color-coded to represent their onboarding into the work via 3 cohorts. The first cohort is green, the second cohort is blue, and the third cohort is yellow. So districts first receive a 1-year grant to support their design and plan process, and then they bring their 3-year strategic plans for another round of funding. It's important to note that Kauffman Foundation is only providing catalytic funding, not underwriting the entire cost of these efforts. So districts are able to incorporate these ideals into their long-term plans and sustain the pivot to and beyond 2030. So we have our cohort 1 districts are getting ready to complete that design and plan process, and they will be pitching their 3-year strategic plans here at the end of May. And cohort 2 is onboarded and ready to roll, if you will, through their design and plan process. We're seeing a lot of transferability of learning across school districts, partnerships that I think will show up and create efficiencies and greater effectiveness on the employer side as well. So that is great to see. And it's also probably important to note that the activity of real world learning is not limited to the 6-county footprint. Employers, our region, people cross these lines every day in many ways. People are not crossing them a lot right now, but a lot of the work is really without boundaries. And so if you represent an employer that's not in that 6-county footprint, you are still absolutely invited to be a part of the learning. Students and families and employers move across these lines every day. So the question you might have is, what will it take to get these districts to achieve that goal of 2030, getting every student graduated with a market value asset? And the answer really is a strong backing of employer engagement. I think it's definitely worth mentioning that the benefits of real world learning are not limited to the students and educators that participate in them. The benefits very much exist for employers as well. So here are a few of those. The early access to local talent is very important. The value added contributions at an affordable cost of usually free to maybe get some work done. It's a great way to engage your employees, increasing their engagement and sometimes their skill sets. It's a great way to brand your company, and I think it's also a great way to ensure the vibrancy of our community. ultimately knowing that as we grow our regional workforce, it's going to grow our regional economy. So I have said enough about real world learning. What I am going to do now is post a link in the chat that you should then copy out into your browser to watch a video to hear directly from students of their real world learning experiences. And this video is about 5 minutes long. And so what I will do is give everybody 5 minutes to watch it, and then we'll come back together to hear from our panelists and really hear about real world learning in action. So happy video watching. So if my timer is correct, everyone should be close to finishing the video. If somebody wants to drop into the chat to let me know if they are done, that would be great. Okay, so let's hop into the next portion of our meeting. Let me get, let's see. Okay, so is everyone done with watching the video? Okay, great. So what I would like to do next is give a couple of employers and a school district representative, as well as an a business intermediary partner, excuse me, a chance to share how they have been involved in real world learning and education engagements over the recent years, but also to share what they're excited about that will be coming up in the coming school year. So I would like to thank and introduce Jack Fry, owner of Fry and Associates, Keith Chapman, owner of Peculiar Controls, representing our employers, Rich Groves, executive director of North Kansas City Business Council, who's been a great champion for learning opportunities there in the Northland, and last Jake Wingo, who is the community partnership coordinator for Ray Peck School District. So I would love to start first with our employers. If Keith and Jack, if you could both share what engagements you have been supporting up to this point, or maybe what engagements you are looking forward to that the group might find beneficial as some examples of engagement for students.
You want me to go first here? Yeah.
Sure.
Let's see. Last year, well, first of all, Rich and I have talked a lot about this. I'm currently the president of the Business Council, so we've kind of worked back and forth a lot of the CAPS programs, and he's done a really good job of promoting it. Probably the challenge is there's not a lot of information in the community on these programs and how to embrace them, especially as a small business owner, because I don't have the luxury of a bunch of directors or different parts of the business that can just create a program for somebody. So the challenge becomes, how do you integrate it? So we've done some work with it. Some of the stuff I want to do is do more work with high school students in CAD and design and more of the technical learning side of it. The challenge for me has been trying to put together a program as a small business that you can replicate, because, money and cost is one thing, time is just as valuable a lot of times. So anything that can be put out there to give us guidance and even kind of learning outcomes that allows us to program that in and make that better. And that's really helpful from a small business. What we have done is something a little different. We were working with the North Kansas City School District on is they were sending out students to businesses to show how the information they're learning in school is being applied in business. So, and I thought that was a great program, because now, my oldest is like a senior in college now, but when he was in 10th grade, he came home just freaking out because he was being asked to decide what career he needs to do so that he can start doing financial planning and all that. He's like, I don't know what to do. I have no idea. So the earlier that we could expose students to what's out there, because, 14, 15, 16-year-old kids don't understand how skills are applied in the world, the better they are at being able to make these decisions and planning them, because high school is trying to teach the skills to support being an adult, but they don't have any idea of what they're going to do to be an adult. So there's a huge gap there that I think this is very important for. We worked with Antioch Middle School and brought in 2 7th grade accelerated math classes. So what we did is we broke into, it was an hour long, 2 different times. I think we also did in Northgate. And they came in and we took them to 3 different stations in our business. One of them, like you were just talking about, the skills with slope and layout. We showed them how we laid out a playground area using the Pythagorean theorem, how we square everything up using math, and we do the math for them. So they understand, oh, this algebra actually has a practical use in the real world, and maybe I could use this. We brought them in and showed them how we mixed rubber and binder. And we had to figure out, we had to convert ratios into weights that somebody can weigh out on, and then turn that into a volume. So we were teaching them how we have to go through the steps to convert units, so that when somebody's out there quickly dumping binder into a mixer with rubber, they're able to do that very quickly and accurately, because if it's off, it won't perform the way it needs to be. And then we also brought them in and showed them how we do a lot of the CAD and layout and create use zones, and how all the geometry is used to figure out all the shapes in the playgrounds, how we can put something together and then bring it to the real world and make it look the same. So that's how we've engaged a lot of the students.
That sounds awesome. I feel like if I had had learning experiences like that, I would have really enjoyed some of my coursework more, because what a great application you're providing for those students. Thank you. Keith, do you want to chime in here? Let me make sure you're not muted. Oop, wrong button.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. So I just discovered this morning that my laptop does not have a webcam.
Oh no.
So sorry you can't see me, but I don't know. I'd never really given thought to whether something like RWL was a thing or not. My hiring philosophy has been to bring on board people who may not necessarily have the skill set developed already for the work that we do in my shop, but if I can bring in bright people who are eager to learn skills and to engage and stretch out beyond their comfort zone, that's what I love seeing people flourish like that. We have brought on a high school student from Ray Peck. He works for us part-time. He is captain of the robotics team there, and his the skills that he possesses already fit beautifully with the work that we do here. But he's learning some other aspects to it, how in our industry it can be very fast-paced and very demanding, and he's really fallen in with the flow of work around here and made major contributions to what we're doing. He got on Google Docs and wrote a script, rather large script, for an Excel spreadsheet to manage our inventory. Which, we were at a point where our needs exceeded the capacity that we had for managing the inventory, but we were not ready to spend money to purchase a software system for it. And what he gave us was a beautiful stopgap, and it's going to work for us for the foreseeable future, which has been fantastic. We also have an intern from UMKC, electrical engineering intern, He started with us just a couple of weeks before things started shutting down. So unfortunately, our experience with him hasn't, I haven't seen him for a few weeks now, other than talking on the phone. But, he came in and he's getting exposure to a lot of things that the college students would not ordinarily see. Our equipment is kind of specialized, the stuff that we work on, and I've seen other electrical engineering students or recent graduates who have had no idea what industrial control systems look like or how they operate, and it's been a good experience for him, getting exposure to all that stuff. And yeah, I'm not quite sure what else to say about it.
No, that's great, Keith. I love your example of that inventory management solution, because I think, the traditional model is set up so that you don't usually hit the workforce for an opportunity like that until, certainly after high school, oftentimes after college or completing another program. And the reality is that we see high school students able to provide great contributions to businesses. So why should they have to wait? And why should you as an employer have to wait? I think that is great.
Right.
As that is such a fantastic example, I'll ask Jake to weigh in now with the school district perspective of what does it take to get started with an employer to find the students, create the opportunities. What does that look like?
To get started with an employer, it's very simple. Make a phone call. A lot of people aren't comfortable making cold calls, and give me one sec here. Sorry, my 2-year-old is crying, but yeah. So a lot of people aren't comfortable making cold calls, but that's really the start most of the time. After that, I went out to meet Keith. I think his business aligns really well with what we're looking to do. I met him and his wife, and they aren't necessarily looking for a 4-year degree student. Even I'm sure they will take them, but not necessarily needed for what they do. They are seemingly very interested in taking a student that has an interest, like he said, and teaching them to do the job the way they need it done. So a student necessarily going out and learning skills that they're not going to use to work at peculiar controls isn't necessarily of value to them. So they're right in our backyard. They're 5 minutes from the school. They do something that is with the creation of those industrial control panels. They do something that is niche in a sense, but also in their specific industry, but also needed all over the place as automation picks up all over the world. It's just going to be a growing need everywhere. So we don't have a lot of those opportunities down where we are for that type of automation and advanced manufacturing and things like that. But it's been a great fit so far. And unfortunately, as we've been working on our 3-year plan, we haven't had a lot of opportunities to engage employers in a firm ask at this point. But since after we make our 3-year pitch plan in May, those will keep coming. Don't worry, Keith.
Never
All
let
good.
that opportunity slide. So what I would love to hear from next, because I think Caleb on the chat raised a great question, and one that we hear a lot, and that's really the how small businesses, as it requires the resources to build a relationship and the practice to get started. I would be curious to hear from Rich on how he has seen his small businesses come together and how they have been successful in engaging. And we'll probably also talk about this in greater depth in our Q&A piece, but one of the challenges, I think, the assumption going into this that I personally had, about a year ago, is that really the larger regional employers were getting the multiple asks from different school districts that looked, it may have been called an internship, but it was like 40 flavors of internships. But I have become acutely aware of the challenges of small businesses of late. And I think that is a priority for us as we work on creating consistency of what these opportunities mean for school districts to execute. Similarly, the consistency and kind of plug and play opportunities for small businesses is just as important. And so I know Rich has worked with a lot of small businesses in North Kansas City for internships to get them on board with the CAPS program. So Rich, could you share kind of the role that you have played and what you have seen unfold with those small business partners?
Yes, be glad to. And as Anna has said, I'm pretty passionate about this and have been for quite a while. I was very fortunate to be able to be a part of the foundation of Northland CAPS on the board initially 5 or 6, 7 years ago, and have been able to watch that grow from infancy to now 400 students a year, having the opportunity for some of these experiences, projects, and internships. The Business Council is kind of like a Chamber of Commerce or an Economic Development Council. We're in the business of knowing a lot of businesses in our territory and getting to understand their needs and capabilities. And we're fortunate, I think, in the Northland, we have a pretty good group that connects the business community with the education community. We call it the Northland Education and Business Alliance, NEBA, and that has helped a lot. So in my role, I have the capability of, one, having a database of about 900 businesses in North Kansas City, and the opportunity as needed or as desired to send out emails that promote things like internships and projects through CAPS, and also to have programs that bring in people from various programs to explain this for luncheons or other events. So we have the opportunity to get the word out. And I personally have used Northland CAP students for projects almost every semester, interns every time I get a chance personally. So I have a lot of personal experience doing this and can share that with businesses that might have some interest. It's not a hard sell to get a business interested because, as you pointed out on the enlightened self-interest points, there's some no-brainers in there. It's really important to them. They can see the value in it easily. But the other point that you had made earlier about the easy button, that's really important because small business particularly does not have an abundance of staff to make this work. They don't have, it'll be the rare one that has much time to figure it all out. If you can help them really know how to plug it in and make it work. And it is gratifying to see these students get engaged. To quote one of our other advocates in the Northland, he said that an 18-year-old can behave like a 12-year-old or like a 25-year-old, depending on what you expect of them. And we expect them to behave like a 25-year-old, and most of the time they do. And the benefit to them is great, and the benefit to the business is great. It's still early, I guess, in terms of seeing the real harvest that we are working towards, which is attracting and keeping these students when they complete whatever formal education they're going to have to remember the business they were part of or the industry, or to at least realize that in Kansas City area, there are lots of careers. They don't have to go to Austin or Denver or Chicago to have a good career. So we're just really pleased to be a part of this and pleased to be kind of in the middle where we can keep tuned in to the school districts and the higher education, particularly Metropolitan Community College, but others as well, and with the business community, and just trying to be a real missionary for this whole concept.
Thank you, Rich. And you always do a great job of that work. So it's much appreciated. I would, before we move on, I'd like for Andrew specifically, as those on the call obviously are here because you're likely members of the Greater Kansas City Chamber, give Andrew a chance to also weigh in on how the Chamber is specifically supporting these efforts and what the plans might be for those small businesses looking to coalesce.
Yeah, thank you, Anna. So kind of to echo Rich's point, you know, the Chamber is really here to help bridge the connection between business and education, put those partnerships in place, and kind of make it as easy as possible for our members and businesses to really engage in this process. You know, there's multiple ways to get involved. It doesn't necessarily have to involve straight up internships, you know, whether it be client-based projects or, you know, just career exploration. So it's really helping our members just understand, you know, the different ways that they can plug in and who to connect with at the various school districts. And as we go on, you know, us, the Civic Council, all the Metro chambers are jumping on board on this to try and provide as many resources as possible, really, to, you know, bridge those connections and make it as easy as possible for, you know, those businesses that want to participate to connect with the right districts, however many they may be, and get those student exposure experiences going. And, you know, the Chamber's big push on this is a really great opportunity for our region to help build up our workforce of the future. Workforce continues to be one of the #1 things we hear from you guys, from our members. And so, you know, prior to COVID and then, you know, with a couple of surveys that we've sent out during all these extraordinary times, access to workforce is still going to be one of the primary issues that we're going to be looking at. So in terms of Chamber support, you know, we're happy to place those connections wherever they may be.
Thank you for that. I hopped forward to the next slide, although I don't, can you see what I'm typing? Can everyone see what I'm typing into this? You can? Okay, good. Because I see it on one screen and then I don't see it on the other. So I'm trying to kind of capture a little bit of what has come up in this discussion. And certainly if you would like to weigh in, unmute yourself or type it into the chat. But I think it's helpful at this point to really take a look at what questions you have coming out of this discussion, and then where we can move forward together. So if anybody wants to hop in, I'm going to capture some of what we've got so far.
Well, we've focused a lot, at least in my mind, I think we're talking mostly about the high school experience opportunities, but I think as soon as we can move it down to lower grades and start that awareness, and Jack pointed out an example of what they've done, and I know there's Holland 1916's had a fourth grade tour every week. They have an hour and a half set aside by their staff to work with a fourth grade class on the applied use of math and design and things like that. But we need to get students and parents starting to think more broadly about what career possibilities there are, and so that when they get to high school, they'll be just raring to go to get more involved in these real world learning experiences.
Yes, that is a great point, Rich. And while most of what we've talked about today does seem to be focused on high school experiences, the reality, and I'm sure Jake can attest to this as well, is that our school districts know that for their students to be ready for these experiences in high school, the work has to start upstream so that they're making more informed decisions, that they have the appropriate tools in the toolbox, if you will, to pursue a pathway or proceed for a work-based experience or greater depth engagement. And so what we are seeing is that while the finish line, if you will, is high school, and there's a lot of activity focused on redesigning experiences that happen in that 9th through 12th grade, the reality is that districts are spending, a significant amount of time on what is happening in middle school and even some in elementary school to prepare students for that. So thank you, because I would hate for somebody to leave this today and think that our districts were only working on high school opportunities.
Yeah, we certainly are. I know Northland, the Northland CAPS program has certainly been around longer than what we've been doing. We really just started this work this year, and that makes it a little bit easier to work backwards for that group. And what our advisory committee has kind of landed on is building backwards, creating that finish line first, so that we know what we need to educate our middle school and elementary school students work towards, is kind of the only feasible way to do it at this point. Plus, if we don't focus on those seniors right now, they won't ever get a chance from us. So as soon as we get it implemented, middle school is definitely the next.
I love that. Thank you, Jake. And I think, Jack, you provided such a great example. I think most of what our mental model references for those high school experiences are maybe elective experiences, or it's something that's happening outside of that core content area. And so that's where you have really found a sweet spot. If you're plugging into middle school and you're looking at students taking math class, everybody is getting that real world learning exposure. And that's what really adds to the preparation, so that if somebody has that spark ignited and then they, continue to pursue mentally or actually through a physical pathway at their school, then they are more prepared to come to you for an internship or a client connected project. So that's great. What I will hop to next is really the part where I joke that there's no, oh, look at that. There's my text. Hold on. I joke that there's no free lunch, but since I have not provided lunch for you all, I can't say that. But I look forward to the day that we get together in person and I can provide lunch. What I really would love to do is spend our last 10 minutes or so together thinking through how we can engage you as individuals, as employers and organizations, and then also how we can activate your networks. Our footprint of school districts representing 100,000 students that are going to be pursuing these opportunities is not going to happen without the engagement of all employer sizes, industries, and types. So our first goal is that everyone who is participating on this call would join the network. And by joining the network, I will have a way for you to commit here shortly. But really what we would like for you to do is commit to providing 4 experiences in the coming school year. So that's 1 per quarter. If you're thinking along the lines of school year planning or time planning, and we can connect you with a school district or several to facilitate, greater depth of how that might happen. And then the second piece is we would love for you to bring your friends. So think about within your industry or your personal network and refer 5 new employers to come and join the movement. So what will you actually be committing to do? I'll reference this continuum again. So those experiences fall really into 3 categories. Exploration, where you're providing, a short burst of content or activities that allow students, usually further upstream, elementary or middle school, to try things on, right? And then next, that deeper level of engagement is where you provide something, maybe a project, where they can apply that learning and have a practical experience with it. And then lastly, the opportunity to immerse themselves in your work, actually doing the work in an authentic environment with professionals, recognizing that authentic environment right now looks a little bit different than it has in the past. But hey, we're all virtual, so I guess that makes it authentic, right? So in the current environment, I, want to absolutely acknowledge this. So how can you create value together? I think if you can provide problems for students to solve, the example of an inventory management system is a great one. We have seen things like that happen over and over again. You can offer virtual connections such as mentoring, or even virtual internships are still happening. And we would be happy to connect you with those who are doing those so that you can take what they are finding and apply it to yourself. Always, it's a great idea to connect with educators to share insight into your company or your industry. We have a veritable army of educators that are looking for opportunities to learn, to provide that context back in the classroom. Of course, you can always and should always be an advocate for this work. My contact information is on this last slide here, and we'll make sure that you have that so that you can follow up. And then lastly, of course, identify other opportunities to share this message. This session today will be recorded, but I am more than happy to participate virtually or eventually in person with any individual or group that's looking to learn more about real-world learning. So what we will look to do today is, secure your commitment to engage. We have an employer intake survey that will lead to a conversation with myself or my peer Salvador. We will get you connected to districts who align with the work that you are wanting to do. And then where you are interested in joining our network events, you are more than welcome. So this is the very high-tech way that we have for you to commit right now. But using the chat function, which I think everyone is familiar with at this point, just go and type into the window I'm in, and we will have that as a way to then secure that commitment and know who to follow up with to get the next steps underway. John, I love your response. The "oh, we're in" is my favorite. I love the enthusiasm. So I will, while everyone's typing that in, because I know everyone will type it in, right? I'm going to pop here to this next slide that has my contact information on it, and then also my peer Salvador, who's also working on making those business connections for our school districts. If you are interested in learning more, don't hesitate to reach out. If you want to talk specifically with our panelists, I have their contact information as well, and they have agreed to share that. So with that, we have about 5 minutes left, so I can give you that gift back, or if anybody has any other questions, I would be happy to answer them now. And this is the part where the pauses always feel so much longer on Zoom.
Well, thank you, Anna, for setting this up and helping us spread the word.
Thank you, Rich. It's always great to see you. And thank you to Jack and Keith and Jake as well. Your perspective is invaluable.
Sure. Like I said, I'd recommend some sort of experience. And it's not just for the students, but I found my employees really enjoyed engaging with the students, because you hear a lot of things about, kids and blah, 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 blah. And it's good to interact with good students that have a lot of enthusiasm. It changes your perspective. Plus, when an employee has to teach somebody what they do, it forces them to really understand and learn better what they're doing. So there's a big value to us in doing things like that.
I could
You
not
can't host an
have planned a better
internship.
commercial.
If you can't host an internship or anything like that, there's lots of other less time-intensive ways to help. So don't let that scare you off.
Absolutely. And we are finding that virtual applies to just about everything. That students, well, shoot, most students are more adept at these things than the adults. But that those meaningful engagements are absolutely still possible and happening, even though we are all physically apart. Okay, so with that, we'll go ahead and wrap up, but I look forward to following up with you all, and always here to answer any more questions. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.